What's up, everybody? It's your girl Karma. Welcome in to the EU Invitational Recap edition of Off the Post. I'm joined, as always, by Kronovi and Spaceman. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, doing good.
Are you? Are you doing good, man?
I mean,
it's times out here. What? How you feeling?
Yeah, you're right. It's so hectic that we are doing the show on a Monday.
That's true. I'm
crazy.
fine. I don't know why I instigated. We're good. I'm just, it's Monday. It's crazy. The world's going crazy. I'm just Rocket League's the constant here. Okay, that's what I'm excited about. That's all.
We were definitely having some interesting off-air conversations about the real world, but we're here to talk about Rocket League. We did miss our EU post-game show yesterday. We apologize for that. We had some time constraints due to the tiebreakers that were being played after RLCS, so we were unable to accommodate for that. So we decided to push to a day later for those listening. We appreciate your patience. So we're going to start off by talking about what a crazy final that we had in the Carmine versus Liquid series. It went all 7 games. Liquid, of course, coming out on top, which I think was a huge surprise. And I just wanted to hear your initial thoughts, guys, if you want to take it away. What did you see from that series?
Well, Carmine were looking to get the trifecta for this regional. They were looking to get 3 for 3 wins, and Liquid, in classic Liquid fashion, said, "Hey, it's regional 3. It's time to really step up." And Liquid were playing so well. I still thought Carmine had it, but there was a really key moment. I think it was game 5 or it was game 4, where I thought Liquid were going to be in a really bad spot with their timeout situation.
Yeah.
And if they didn't win that game, it was going to be, I think Carmine would be up 3-1 on them. And teams that are down 1-3 in the series that call a timeout are 1 in 55 lifetime across all regions.
Ooh.
It was
Say that
better
again?
just forfeiting the series.
Teams that don't call a timeout are 1 in 55?
No, teams that do. Normally you get a timeout buff. You get a 54% win rate after calling a timeout. It's not much, but it's something.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But if you're down 1-3 and you time out, you instantly just, it's like winning the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're down 1-3 and you time out, you win the game pretty much.
No, so if you're down 3-1 in the series and you're like, all right, we're calling our timeout because we're down 3-1, the game you come back, there's like a 99% chance you're going to lose.
Oh, okay. So you shouldn't call a timeout, is what you're saying.
The teams that have called a timeout 55 times, only one team has won.
And it was an SSA team. That's the region that did it.
So just don't do that. Ever.
So the strat is the before game 7 timeout, right? Or
and
the before game 3 timeout.
Timeout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is for best of 7s too. Oh, I guess you can't be down 3-1 or best of 5. You just lost. Never mind.
Yeah, you also can't
We
call
are in fact
timeouts
down
in best
3-1
of
in
5.
best of 5. That is correct.
We're down 3-1. Well, let's call a timeout, guys.
We're taking a 24-hour timeout. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. 1 week, 2 week timeout, or after this invitational, a 4-month timeout.
Yeah.
Nah. With the major coming up. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that Liquid, they're a team that's really surprised me. I think I tweeted out this weekend that Team Liquid waited 2 years to have a roster here, this particular roster flourish and take off, and to see Liquid come through and win the regional, I think was huge, not only for the org standing by their team for this long, because a lot of people, including me, were like, what are Liquid doing here? They're hanging on to this roster. They could be picking up someone a lot more dangerous. Like, they have a huge brand, and they were committed to sticking with the young players, and it's paid off. Now they have a roster here that beat the #1 team in Europe clearly in 7, so they weren't playing terrible, right? So it was clearly a close series. You're young, you're inexperienced, you come through, you gain all that experience, and you leave with the win right before the major. I mean, that has to be really good spirits heading into San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still don't know if Liquid are going to be as good as they were in this grand final at the major, though.
I doubt it. I mean, it's not.
Are they a LAN team, you think?
Maybe. They're better than most, but they don't have that much experience on LAN, unfortunately. So,
but they do have the LAN headquarters. Like, they're in that. They're all in the same place. They're playing with lights on.
Oh, so they're gonna have the boot camp buff because they're nearby.
Yeah.
No, they're at the boot camp now. Like, they play the regional in their boot camp. You know what I mean?
Oh.
But I think that at this point, most teams are most teams, when they have the opportunity to boot camp, do so. Like, back in the day when boot camping was like it was a thing. It was like, oh my god, they're showing up 2 weeks before a LAN, like they're gonna smoke. But now, like, outside of, I mean, Gen G does not boot camp; they just sit in their apartments. But like a lot of teams boot camp now, and I think that Liquid we need more sample size from them on an actual LAN with like, you know, because everything's out the window, stakes are different, the environment's different. But this is a Liquid roster that I expect to get at least top 6 going to the major. They've proven that they're that consistent. Again, let's look back to spring when they lost near what 5th through 8th. I think it was like the top 6-ish. They lost to Gen G in like a game 7, if memory serves. So
yeah, they're 5th through 8th.
Yeah, so there's precedent here, and I think Liquid did the right thing because everybody's wondering, why isn't Liquid picking up a top roster? Why are they doing this? For Liquid's sake, financially, they're like, look, we have a young squad, and the embers of this squad were there last season when everyone's like, Liquids, they look like they're potentially going to get better. The mechanics are there. Everyone said last season near the end they were one of the best mechanical teams, even though they never really showed what they could do. It's like, okay, Liquid next going into this year, it's like, oh, this is a real powerhouse squad. They could really do something. The Liquid organization took a financial risk, said we're just gonna, you know what, if they don't do well, we can let them go. If they do well, then we'll pay them. But for right now, we're gonna see what they can do. And then all of a sudden, boom, 2 third regionals in a row. You get them performing like they have against Carmine again, and they go an extra game this time, but they take it in game 7, which shows ice. So this is a good start for Liquid. I think Liquid, I don't want to say they're back because we'll see how they do on land, but Liquid's definitely a top 8, top 6 team, in my opinion, going into the major, and they should feel good because they've proven that they can go toe-to-toe with Carmine twice, not just once. So it's a good weekend for them.
Yeah, the consistency over time for Liquid has definitely been improving, and that's really why I'm a bit skeptical with, like, you know, them being maybe a top 4 team at LAN. I think 6 is definitely a good spot to have them. I mean, the thing is that no one would be surprised if Liquid showed up at the grand final. They would just have to be at their peak on the day, and not many people are going to like predict, because it's a bit of a risk to predict a team to just suddenly play their best in front of the crowd on LAN and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Are we wrong in saying that a mechanical playstyle is not really a LAN playstyle, or is that just, do you think, an overstatement?
Do they go hand in hand?
I mean, you don't want to try to do things that you can't do on LAN, because then you're going to make free mistakes and hand the ball over. So you want to play to your peak mechanics if you have them. But all the players that qualify for the LAN are mechanical. This is the thing. There are no non-mechanical players at the LAN that I can think of.
It's more, I was more leaning towards like the play style, because the classic argument that I always hear, or at least that's played in my head, is, okay, we're at the LAN, we have the crowd going, the nerves are up. We can't do these insane sidewall double touches like we can when we're at home in our quiet boot camp room, you know? I'm not saying that, you know, that Liquid can't pull it off. I'm just throwing it out for discussion, you know. Is that type of play style where you have to be mechanically perfect more difficult than, say, a Gen G's play style, who just follow their positional, you know, they're kind of put into this robotic form where they're just following their positional rotation, and they don't have to think as much or hit those insane mechanics as frequently, because, you know, they're more in position, they're more relaxed. So that environment doesn't really come in and affect them as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that something you guys see happening with Liquid, or do you guys see that Liquid on the field, like we saw, take down who I would consider, you know, this Carmine team that plays similar to Gen G, that positional style that they beat in 7 games? Because there is the argument that if the mechanical team plays better mechanically, they'll win. The problem is that the mechanics aren't consistent enough yet to beat that positional style, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the opponent too, because I think Liquid, I think the top teams kind of know what they can and can't pull off on certain squads, but it also just comes down to, again, when we look at one of the reasons why Moist with the original 3 were so successful, is because they did all their mechanics that they wanted to, both online and in LAN, the same way they had practiced, but they were also just fundamentally one of the best rotational and counterattack teams, and they didn't make mistakes. So like they knew if they went for mechanics and it wasn't there, okay, we're just going to do our we're going to lean back on our fundamentals, and we're going to focus on the team play. And that's what carried them through their lower bracket run in the Winter Major last year. Like, I think that the best teams are the ones who aren't afraid to just show up and do the mechanics that they want to, because they've been doing that. And if it doesn't work, they're going to be able to adjust and go back to doing teamwork only, which is why FaZe has struggled on LAN, because they focus so heavily on doing the team play in the early start of the LAN, and then they mix in some mechanics, and you're like, oh my god, FaZe is here. And then when it comes to Saturday and Sunday, they show up and then they struggle with the team play, they struggle with the passes, and then their mechanics try to do too much and they get nothing out of it. So it's like, if you can just do the same thing you've been doing online, but translate it to a LAN environment and then trust your team to do what they've done, I don't see the reason why Team Liquid can't show up and try to be mechanical gods. That just means that their team play has to stay at least baseline, which so far it has. So I think they absolutely can do it.
It's what's taken Liquid so far. Like, for them to grow as a team, they always had the good mechanics. You know, Liquid invested in these young mechanical players, and the mechanics stayed with them. But they really, what's made Liquid successful is working as a team, utilizing their passing, their possession plays, having proper rotations. I mean, I want to dare say that Carmine have been doing so well this whole split, and it's not like they've been scoring crazy, insane solo goals. And we talk about Vatira being, he's the best player in the world right now. And I think this regional, he didn't even have to do a whole lot, and they just like breezed into the grand finals and almost won it. It was close. Exotic and Itachi were having much better games, but that's the strength of these top teams. You have 3 people that are equally splitting a third of the work, and there's not really a lot on one person's shoulders.
My last question for you guys here is, has a Tao, because I'm picking him because I've mentioned him the past few EU talks. I put a Tao, I highly value him as a player. Now seeing Liquid rise up the ranks, I think he is really making a name for himself. Would you guys put a Tao right now in your top 5 players in Europe? Yes or no?
I think you have to.
I think you have to as well, because I think a Liquid player needs to be on there.
Yeah,
and it's just a matter of which one, because they're all.
I think
Chronic's
also
argument
really
for all
insane.
of them.
Yeah. Chronic just ends up playing back more. Like, he's not on the ball as much. I mean, did you guys see a Chronic's? It's right off the kickoff.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
The crazy sidewall double that he got, it was disgusting. And Chronic just needs once he gets a little bit of space, he scores a flasher mechanics. But Atao will just. It's almost kind of like with the Joyo back in the day with Moist. You give him like an extra half second, and then he just destroys you with that half second that you give him. Same kind of vibe there. I might have a Tao at like my 4 or number 3, honestly.
What do you think about Oski? I think he's at least top 10, sure. But
Oski's
he
really
hasn't
good as well.
been he hasn't been as, and again, it's not a detriment. He has not been as electric and spontaneous as he was looking back to the end of last season, but he's been as consistent as I had hoped he'd be, and he's still, I think, the number 2 punch on that squad. I think Oski is, and his decision making when the play breaks down and he has possession is like insane.
This is what makes Liquid so good. They just have like players that have all the stuff where they can be in these discussions for top 5, and still it's like, oh, but they didn't do anything crazy. No, he was just hyper consistent, and that's also an incredible asset to a team to just not make mistakes. When was the last time you saw Oski just completely throw the ball away and mess up and cause a goal? Like, never.
They're all just way too. They're so good
That's the thing, man.
They're just so good at controlling it. Like, my top 5 in Europe right now, I think, is Zen, Vatira, Jorias, Exotic, and Atao. I think those are my top 5
Itachi?
players.
Oh man, it's hard because I want to
He's
put all the
probably
Carmine
6
players.
or 7. Like, he's right there, but
I think
can't.
this split Itachi has to be top 5.
If the list is fluid, I would also just honorable mentions. I'd also like to throw in, for this split, I'd like to throw in Juicy. I thought he had a phenomenal split, or at least this weekend, and this weekend too. Like, he had a phenomenal split, but especially this weekend. Rise and Ixo as well. I mean, Ixo has been flourishing on Quadrant, and even Rise with a broken hand was still coming up clutch.
He had an insane Friday.
For Team Liquid.
Yeah, like, I mean, the dude's
All
got
on
a
the
broken
sidewall.
hand, and he's still doing what he's doing. Like, that's the thing. Like, Europe is, I feel like Europe is much more fluid of a top 5 or top 10 list for current, like, top players than maybe NA is, because NA is, it just seems like NA in terms of the top 2 or 3 teams a little bit more structured, whereas Europe, it's like every squad who's in the top 6 for rankings, there's always somebody on that team where, like, you're watching them at any moment, you're like, that's the best player right now on today, like,
true.
at all. And it's just, that's why when you look at Liquid going into the major, or even, you know, other squads who I hope to get to that point, like Quadrant, I think if Quadrant ever do make it to that point, they'll be great on LAN. It's that, like, you know, they could just come out and annihilate some NA teams off rip on like a Thursday or Friday, and all of a sudden they're causing disruptions in the pool. So Yeah, Europe is stacked with individual talent, and that's why the rankings are so weird, because it's chaos all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is a testament to how well Europe have maintained their top level. I think they've done a really good job at implementing new players when for a long time I thought they did a horrible job at it. And I thought it caused them to be behind in a sense for a while, like back in Season X and Season 9, stuff like that. So I think...
That goal from Ixos. Oof.
Yeah, that was clean.
Sorry.
So I think if you're watching on the simulcast, we have some replays going in the background as a Chronic gets his double touch.
For those of you who have no idea what's going on, there's highlights happening.
Yeah. So I think Europe is really flourishing right now, and it's refreshing to see, because I used to think Europe was kind of boring to watch because one team would just dominate. Now it's kind of be like NA, where teams are starting to trade, and yeah, Carmine is dominating, of course. It seems like they are level, but once you get past Carmine, then it's a real dogfight, I think, to kind of nip at their heels, and that's interesting, because I don't really think NA has that. I think NA has Gen G and FaZe, maybe 2 or 3 teams that you think can win the regional, and then after that, it's like a gap.
Yeah, Gen G, FaZe, G2, and then...
And that gap, and then no other team has a chance at winning the regional unless some insane thing happens. Could you guys see...
winning it, so... Just saying.
Like, I guess Dignitas are the closest we've ever had to a moist run in NA. Oxygen did it last year. They made it to semis against NRG, I think. I don't remember when that was. But
oh, yeah, that was... Yeah, I remember
they
that
were like a
roster.
16th seed with LJ and Toasty, and
wouldn't
they made
M80
it...
be the closest?
To who?
Would in terms of the analogy of like the closest to a moist run, wouldn't M80 as of now be kind of the one team that's maybe the closest to making a run?
They made what? Did they make top 4?
I mean,
think Dig made top 4, which is about the same as M80. And
that's a good point. Yeah, so Dig made the top 4, but M80's made top 8 two times in a row, and they almost started a reverse sweep possibility against Gen G. They started taking games off them, so they made it at least interesting. But they got to quarterfinals and then dropped out. But they beat Furia 3-0, which was cool. But yeah, I mean, M80, like that's another squad where you're like, oh, like the gap is very large between the top of NA and not that those players aren't good. It's just like, okay, the top 3 of NA are the top 3, and everybody else is having to deal with the open bracket teams coming through and like the close qual teams like Koi showing up and stuff. So
it's creating a lot of competition, between the teams that are just outside, like top 3, top 4. Everyone's actually pretty close now, and maybe we'll get another 3-way tiebreaker in North America.
That was insane.
Oh my God, please.
Yeah, that was wild. 3-way tiebreaker this weekend was insane. The 3 teams tied, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, were Quadrant, G1, and German Amigos.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those 3 had to be played same day following the finals. Now
after the finals.
Yeah. Right after Carmine and Liquid. And Quadrant ended up falling short. And G1 went on to the major. German Amigos didn't, right? It was just G1 from that group?
Yeah, so I want to touch on the format a little bit with the way they did the tiebreaker, because what they did was they did it right after grand finals, and they did a single elim bracket where they first simplified the 3-way tiebreaker. They said, all right, Quadrant, you have the best record out of everyone else. We're going to move you ahead in this bracket with a bye. The remaining 2, G1 and German Amigos, you're going to play each other, and winner of that will play Quadrant. Winner of that goes to the major. Just very, very, very simple. 2 matches, 2 best of 7s to get done. But I don't know if I like them doing that. I think personally, I don't know how you guys feel, but I would have preferred them to do a full round robin into like whoever has the better game differential goes, just so that everybody has to play everybody. Because in this format, I want to say that the team that wins that first matchup has the momentum going into the second matchup and is probably going to win. Because Quadrant were just sitting there. Like, unless Quadrant somehow found a scrim right after grand finals, everybody's done playing and has been done playing for a while. Suddenly Quadrant pick up a random scrim and they don't know who they're going to play.
I think when it comes to, I'm not gonna get into the discussion of like should it be right after grand finals or not, because I have my own thoughts, but I think Twitter's already covered it pretty well. When it comes to the format itself, I think it needs to change versus like if you have 2 teams that are head to head, you play 1 best of 7, I think you call it a day. When it comes to multiple teams having a head to head, 3 teams specifically. I think a better format would have been, and just for maybe future, I think a better format would have been make a double elim. Maybe instead of like make the grand final part or the qualified part a best of 7, but like do it where it's like, okay, everything's a best of 5. Quadrant has the number 1 seed for the sake of this tournament. Quadrant has the number 1 seed, so we're gonna give them a bye. You have G1 and German Amigos play each other. Loser of that drops down, and they play the loser of Quadrant versus the winner of G1 German Amigos. So at least each team gets at least 2 chances, and then whoever wins the Quadrant versus German Amigos or G1 matchup, they go to the quote-unquote grand finals, and they wait for the lowest finals to get done, and then they get a chance, and then if they win the best of 7, they move on. If they don't, they go. So, like, you give everybody a chance to, and whether or not you have a bracket reset in the quote-unquote grand finals, that's up to the discretion of the TOs, but, like, at least you give a chance for players to get off the cold start, and, like, they get a chance to really qualify, because it very much feels like, you know, when you're sitting and you're coming right into it, you have one series, and then if it doesn't go well, you're done. And that sucks a little. So I think that would have been fine if you had 2 teams who like, you know, one team gets to move on, the other goes home. Then you have like a best of 7 series, one and done. I get that. But when you have multiple teams fighting for a qualification spot, I think a better format moving forward might be giving a more traditional bracket style, to where if you lose, you drop down and you have to fight for qualification spot through a lower bracket, versus just jump in and you're done. But again, like, it also comes down to, you know, you have to play well in your group, and that's the whole point of getting points, and, like, you know, not dropping series you're dropping when you shouldn't be, because you don't want to get in positions like this. 100% agree. But I also think that in this instance, when you have multiple teams set up for a qualifying spot that's only one spot, and you have a bunch of teams just trying to fight for it, I think this would have been the time to, instead of going traditional style for tournament bracket, just go like back to a standard double elim, give them a chance, and just, I think that would have been a little bit easier for the players to kind of get into. Because then if you lose, you're like, oh crap, we have to actually try. So
it almost reminds me of the old RLRS quals. If you
Yeah,
set this up as like a double elim, with similar amounts of pressure.
I know Rocket League hates double elim, but for this one time, I'm like, please just do double elim, and that way everybody's happy. Because if you lose, you're not immediately out. You get a chance. So
yeah, like, I thought the format for RLRS was it was great for fans, right? Like, as a player, it was frustrating. I played all season to get one best of 7 against a team, right? Which is frustrating as a player, but as a fan, I thought it was some of the best content Rocket League has ever made. Like, the promo weekend was hype, and so were qualifier weekends.
Yeah.
And I kind of think Rocket League is missing that a little bit sometimes. And I thought that maybe something like this would have been cool for Psionics. I realized that this was a last-second scenario, and it was impossible for them to predict. A 3-way point tie after a month and a half long of events, right? But in the same sense, I thought that this would be a really cool marketing opportunity to put Rocket League on a different day. You know, maybe market it a little bit about like how it's for the major, like it's for European players to win a trip to San Diego. Like that's pretty amazing thing. Which I know is standard now for our esport, but you know, I wish that potentially we could recognize that these events are maybe happen and plan around them, just because I think that it's really good marketing opportunity and a really good series of events for Rocket League fans to watch. Like, qualification for huge events, I think, is one of those things that is like Rocket League has over everyone else. There's no open system other places, and Rocket League is unique that way. Say that again?
It would have made it all more hype.
I think a different day, and like having kind of what we did back when it was like Complexity versus SSG last year, when they were qualifying for their major spot, right? And it was like, oh my god, it's this massive best of 7, everybody tune in. I think having that would have been really beneficial to maybe have it today. Now, granted, to give some insight, when we were in our, whether it was green room or production text during the event this weekend, and on Friday we got a ping, and they space it, and the stats at direct and some of the TOs were talking of like what are the potentials for head to head or whatever. And we already had an inkling that we might be having a tiebreaker. We didn't realize it was going to be 3 teams, but every day on notes on our schedule, we would have, be prepared if we have to have a tiebreaker this weekend, it's going to be after grand finals. So it seemed that the structure was already in place, and they kind of knew that like if we're having a tiebreaker for sure, we're going to have to do it after grand finals. And I assume that was because there was things they couldn't do Monday or things we couldn't do after, and we've already scheduled it to be there. So it's not like these things kind of happen last minute. I don't want people to think like, oh, we've just decided we're doing after grand finals. Like, no, this was in place for a reason. I don't know. I'm not in those meetings, but like I'm assuming it's for a reason. So with that said, at least, you know, there is planning going into this, but it also means that maybe we could try to put it on a different day next time, because I think it would just, especially broadcast wise, I mean, it would bring hype to it, because like when we had SSG versus Complexity, it was this massive thing, and it would be really cool for content to like hype it up for an entire day and be like, oh my god, only one team to go, and then you have this really cool matchup tonight that's just like, oh, everybody tune in, we're gonna see who gets to the major, like super cool presentation. You could even have a whole graphics package for it.
It's like a pay-per-view boxing match, you know.
Literally, it's like,
Yeah,
oh, we have like
exactly.
these crazy intros and like there's only one team, guys. I was like WWE or something. Like it'd be great. Yeah, I think, you know, in the future, I'd like to see it maybe an allotted day after a regional, if we know for a fact we might have a tiebreaker, even after every third regional, because you only get them at that point. It's like, okay, after every third regional, we're gonna have one day where if we have to, we know that we can schedule our tiebreakers on a Monday, and that's what we
Yeah, should just have a tiebreaker day that you
It's called
pick
Fight Night.
ahead of time. And then
Yeah,
like
Fight
if
Night.
anyone ends
That's
up
cool.
tied, you play it on that day and you already have it picked. And that way the teams already know, and you can prepare. You have time to prepare graphics, stuff like that. So a little bit of a critique.
Yeah, but
from
I mean,
off the post.
at the end of the day, G1 stepped up. You know,
Yeah.
they had to win 2 best of 7s in a row to qualify, and they did, and they played really well. So I mean, a ton of props to G1 to have the stamina to get through 2 best of 7s after already playing the regional.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Like, at the
I'll-
end of the day, just win your games, man. Like
You should just win.
you have 3 weeks of groups and stuff. Like it's, if it comes down to head to head, that means that there's mistakes you made. So
I think, you know, for G1, the question I had for you guys was, do you consider Mark by 8 a world champion? Because, and I asked this for a few reasons, and I want to hear what you say first. Just for clarification, he was moved to sub. He was not moved off the roster. He played throughout fall and spring and a full year before that with the BDS team. And then BDS moved him to sub and then won the world championship last year. So, would you guys consider Mark by 8 a world champion?
Well, he's got the title.
Mm-hmm.
Technically speaking,
Crow's
Do I
already
think-
dodging.
yeah. I want to say if he had played in that grand final, maybe not that grand final, if he had played on Championship Sunday in place of Seiko, would they have won?
the way G2 looked, probably.
That's why I was like, maybe not the grand final.
With-
Maybe
yeah,
it wasn't a
honestly.
BDS thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I don't know if they would have.
I don't know that. I don't
Made
remember
it-
well enough.
I don't know if they would have made it to the finals with Mark. But I don't think that's Mark's fault. I think that comes down to Monkey Moon and Extra just feeling more comfortable with Seiko. I think Mark's a good enough player to be in that grand final.
Yeah.
During that time.
I mean, again, this is the that's English, not at all. This is the age-old sports debate that we've had forever. Whenever a player in trad sports gets put on the bench or something and they win a chip and then they have to go prove it somewhere else, this has existed for hundreds of years. Literally, it's just like, okay, is he a world champion? Yes. Is he an RLCS world champion? Yes. He's on the team for a very long time. He contributed a incredible amount to it. Like Mark by 8 and Monkey Moon would not be who they are without Extra and Monkey Moon would not be who they are without Mark by 8. Same vice versa for all 3 players. They won a shit ton, pardon the language, of events together. They've proven that they were one of the best teams of all time just in their run. And he got benched halfway through the end of the year, and they brought on a new kid, and they ended up winning worlds. He is a world champion. Does it mean that he no longer has to prove himself on the big stage, or that he needs to not prove himself at a world championship? No. Like, we want to see him go to a world championship and prove that it wasn't just BDS, that he can do it on his own or with a new squad and he can win, for sure. But at the end of the day, yeah, he is 100% a world champion. He contributed. It wasn't like he joined, played 3 games, and then sat on the bench the entire time. Like, he is a reason that they won that world championship. He may not be the catalyst for it. He may not be the sole reason, but he contributed enough to that squad over a long period of time to get them to that point, to a position where they had to make the change in the first place, and they bring in someone they felt that could match his style or get better. But I mean, it still has the door is still open for him to prove that it wasn't just BDS, or that he shouldn't have been benched. He should have been playing. Like, he has a ring, and a deserved one, but it maybe won't be weighted the same as a Garrett or anybody else. It just, it's different. He has a ring, but it's not the same.
He's a rare circumstance, right? It's because he's like the opposite of the when a sub gets, because we've had this happen twice where a sub gets pulled up to main roster and they win worlds, in Overzero and Turbo, and Mark is the opposite where he got benched and then won worlds.
And then won worlds. And then his team did bad in his defense. They won
right
worlds,
after.
but then since worlds,
and
Mark's
now
done
I don't
better.
know if they're going to make it back to worlds. And that's a funny story now that Mark is going to go to this major in San Diego. BDS
and that helps his case. That really, like in hindsight, that really helps how people view him because they had a good streak and then all of a sudden they just completely fall off the radar. And Mark's like, "Hi, I'm back."
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing is that Mark was always touted as the consistency of the team and the engine. And when he goes, they go. And he's rotationally there and he just keeps it moving. So they take out that piece and they added a mechanical player, which at the time I think made sense because I think they were scared of the apparently Jack, Scrub, Joria's team, which was Dignitas at the time. And they were also afraid of the new Team Queso team, which was the Rage, which you guys know, which ended up being the Moist roster. So I think they saw that and were afraid and were like, okay, we need to add Seiko to keep up mechanically. Like, he can just score goals for us and we can defend. So if we get him, we're good. And then I think after they won Worlds, they were like, okay. And then entering the new season, now things have changed.
He's Carson Wentz of Rocket League. He's literally Carson Wentz. Do you not? Do we all know?
No,
who
I know
that
Carson
is?
Wentz. He used to be the Philly quarterback.
Yeah, Philly Eagles quarterback.
For everyone else and for me, I don't know who that is.
For normies.
Okay. So for all the normies who have no idea what's going on, so Carson Wentz was the Eagles quarterback, and during their Super Bowl year, he was having an MVP season. He ends up getting hurt like 2 games before the playoffs. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, the Eagles are done." They bring up Nick Foles, who's their backup, and they bring him up to start. He wins the last 2 games. They go on a massive run during the playoffs, and they end up beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, one of the greatest runs by a backup quarterback of all time, Nick Foles." Blah blah. And everyone says, Nick Foles, the reason they win the Super Bowl, no question. But let's not forget the 11 or 12 games that were dominated by Carson Wentz to get to that point. So Carson Wentz has a Super Bowl ring, but his entire career after that has been, can he not only get back there, but prove that that wasn't a one-time fluke, that he's good enough to do that again? Same thing with Mark Bayet. It's like, he has a ring, and there's no debate that, like, he earned that. But it's like, okay, it's not weighted the same. Can you prove that you can get back into a championship caliber form, and can you prove that you can get back to a world championship? So he is very similar. It's very much the same.
That was my point. I think this is it. Yeah, I mean, I think you leave the #1 team in the world, or I don't think got benched by the #1 team in the world. Took it on the chin, watched them win worlds, and then went back to the drawing board with countrymen of your own country, people that you're comfortable with, and it didn't go well at first. And now, fast forward 9 months, and here's Mark going to San Diego with his team. And where's his teammates? They're at home, not with wondering if they're even going to make the world championship. Because I have to double check the points. Is it even possible for them to do it?
They definitely can, but it would require, I believe they need multiple top 4 finishes. And if they manage to qualify for the major with decent finishes, they would have to do okay at the major as well. And we haven't seen BDS. The best they've done is a top 8 all season. Actually, this Invitational was their best result.
So they are trending up. 8. In their defense, they're trending up.
Yeah, there are just a lot of teams ahead of them that have a lot more points. That not only do they need top 4 finishes, but they have to do better than these other teams.
And they're straight up better. Like, there are teams ahead of them. They're just straight up better than them. Now, question, random tangential. Do you ever see a situation where they ask Mark Bayet to come back?
Maybe they ask, but would Mark say yes?
I think I heard Sleeky make a noise for the first time this entire show. He's like, no shot.
I don't see that happening.
I think that would be hilariously chaotic for the entire region if they were just like, we're just gonna run it back, and they end up smoking everybody. Oh, give me that.
So I haven't watched BDS because they're not there, so I don't really know what their issue is. But I know Monkey Moon is still a demon. Like, I see him in
Monkey Moon is still putting up top 3 stats on. I'll see Liquid post after the matches, and it's like, oh, the top rating, and Monkey Moon's like right at the top, and they bottomed out early in the tournament.
It's not a skill issue for BDS, that's for sure. So I don't know what the plan is.
Individual wise, it's not, but team wise, they are not.
Team wise, yes, that's what thank you for clarifying. And I'm just worried because this off season, this winter break is usually the mega break of the year. It's where teams realize, okay, we don't have a shot at the World Championship anymore. I need to join a team who does. And teams realize, okay, we need to add something a little extra here to get us over the top if we want to get there, or like, you know, those scenarios come out. So BDS, I think, is a giant red circle around them right now to watch for them this off season after the major, maybe even before the major, because the World Championship team, the only team that has ever won this single World Championship title in BDS, is a potential to not even be there. And that's kind of alarming. I didn't see that. If you were to ask me that after they won entering the year, there's no way I would have said that to you.
I think the drop-off was just staggering because it's not like BDS showed up to the final and blew the doors off the place. They just played like the cleanest, most concise defensive to counterattack Rocket League. I think anybody played that tournament. And granted, if we start ranking grand finals in RLCS championship history against each other, that's going to be near the bottom because G2 just didn't show up and BDS just kind of played free play for the entire time. Like, they weren't working overtime to create offense. They did great jobs they did a great work on defense and did a better job on offense just playing counterattacks, and it was very clean. But I think you're getting to that point where look back to the last Winter Major where NRG were knocked out and BDS was knocked out as well. I think, unfortunately, I was on both those casts, which was hilarious. But that was a situation where we were like, okay, now is the time for a change because it's literally March and we're about to have a Winter Major in April. Like, we're a month ahead. We're in April, and right after that's the Spring Major. Like, you got to make a change here if you're BDS.
BDS have a huge issue too, which is Zen's coming. So that already puts you another ring below, in my opinion. Instantly, you're a ring lower than you already thought you were. So now
Vitality's already going to be ahead of everybody that they're already ahead of right now.
So now you have German Amigos, G1, Vitality Quadrant, Moist, Oxygen, Liquid, and Carmine ahead of you. You're looking at the 9th or 10th seed for BDS.
And that's not good enough for the wild card.
No. Like you said, Kronovi, they need at least top 4 everywhere from here on out if they want a chance.
10th seed, wow, I can't believe that.
Yeah, BDS are like they're in closed quals. They have to. They're not even invited to the events. They got to qualify for them because they're outside top 8.
I mean, M80 would kick their butts. Like, if we're just talking about international as well, even if they make it to a major, like, look at all the teams they still have to get through, let alone their own region. The teams that they're going to have to play.
It's a big statement, Spaceman.
M80 would wipe BDS right now.
Beating a European team? Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, no question. I mean, like, look, M80 is playing consistently better squads than
they are. They're great.
M80's making it to Saturdays. BDS isn't even making it to their consoles. They've struggled. So, like, this is just...
Fair. I can't argue with that.
We're talking about, especially, like, because, again, when you make roster changes, the first thing you think of is, like, well, we want to get better. But I'm thinking, you got to get better, got to compete against your own region, and how do you stack up against internationally? Internationally, you still got to deal with G2, Gen G, and FaZe. There's no shot, even if they make a roster change, they're probably going to compete against that. So, like, this is more than just, we have to fix our ailments now. This is, we're trying to save our season and prove that we can still compete internationally. And I think they can. It's just, like, make a change. Do something, because it's not working.
I think if BDS were going to stop the bleeding, they had to make a change this split. Because it just doesn't make sense for other teams to make a change, like to trade a player with yours. Or because there's no major, it's one major and then Worlds. It's just for some people it's not enough time to like build a new roster. They would rather have like an extra 2. So Moist maybe didn't have the best, maybe Quadrant struggling. Those are the 2 teams that aren't at the major that are thinking, oh, maybe we should do something. But Moist already made their change. They made it last split, and Quadrant maybe they'd be the only ones, but everyone else, like Vitality, are going to pick up their player soon. And Oxygen, Liquid, Carmine are definitely not going to change anything. They've already qualified for stuff.
So if you're BDS, that Vitality player becomes available. Are you interested?
Yes.
Maybe.
Just because they're French and on a Vitality team? I mean, that's one player that has experience all year being higher than you are.
Yeah, so, but that's the thing. Like, who do you even... that becomes the conversation of, legitimately, who do you even have to trade with? Because every team in Europe is above you. Every team's getting better than you. And when you're probably not going to go international for a trade. So if you're just looking at the collective agreement,
that's an option now.
They could, but even let's extrapolate that argument now out to NA as well. What NA team or EU team at this moment in time is going to look at BDS? Do you think any players are going to look at BDS and think, Well, do you think they're going to look at BDS and all of a sudden think like, okay, like that is a trade that if we make it for the players' sake, they're going to be like, yeah, this helps my career. Because right now,
I think
it's like
Monkey
BDS...
Moon to NRG is a huge move. Or Monkey
so
Moon to Optic.
that'd be better for NRG or Optic, whatever. But like, you have to think of it as well from like the play. We're assuming players have more say in this instance, maybe the org. But like player-wise, BDS doesn't even have like recent championships or recent top fours to lean on to say we're enticing, come to us. Because right now they're barely making it. They're not even making it to Saturdays or Sundays, right? So it's like, as a player, why would you want to go play with them if they're not even making top fours anymore? Versus back then, it was like, well, if they're winning a regional here or there, but they're struggling, it's more enticing because maybe you can fix it and all of a sudden you're good. But like now, they're not even winning, so it just why would you want to go there?
You would have to only be able to entice teams that you're already above. You know, so you're looking at like you're basically having to scout talent from below you to fix your mistakes.
Exactly,
and it feels like a risk doing that.
Scout?
Yeah, no one.
You guys are right.
Exactly.
I'm just gonna throw out the argument because I kind of believe this is like, do you back the talent? Because for me, like we talked about, this isn't a skill issue individually. This is clearly, at least to me, a skill issue as a team and not being on the same page. So in that regard, does BDS back the talent and say, you know what, let's see what we do spring split. We can run the whole thing. We can run the gauntlet. We can make top 4. We can win and make the world championship and spin the season around. We have the talent. We have the skill. We have the coaching. I believe in our system. We don't need to make any moves. And if it blows up, then we'll make a move in the offseason because clearly our season went bad, but we at least owe it to ourselves. We're the world champions. We have, is it Mew still? I believe it's Mew. Yeah. We have who people tout as potentially the best coach going into this year. You know, why not back yourselves? Why not be like, all right, we can do it. We have Monkey Moon, a.k.a. Tom Brady, right? We have this guy. I believe in him. Let's go. Yeah, we can change.
I understand it.
Would you guys back BDS to do that? Because I would. I could see that happening. I can see BDS making a top 4, believing in themselves again, combining it with another top 4, and then who knows, now they're back in the conversation again heading into Worlds or the Major, and their confidence is back. And I think that changes a whole bunch of things. They just need results. They kind of screwed this split. They had that, I mean, not screwed. They didn't pay attention to the format, but they ended up winning the same amount as someone else and ended up not being put in the top 8 and getting slotted back a bracket spot into that same day, Friday match, and they lost. Which I think was a huge blow. Thinking you've won Friday for the first time in 6 months and you're set and have a deep breath till tomorrow, only to realize, oh my God, no, we still have to play day after all this, and then you lose on top of that. I mean, that's... I can see why that there's like frustration there, and then after it they still made top 8. So like my whole argument is like I could see them making a run. I could see it, and like you know I back champions. They have the chip. They have the only one that's happened so far, for the whole year, and I don't know. I can see them totally making a run and backing themselves, but definitely a team to keep an eye on. You know,
it's a long road to back yourself when times are tough. I mean, NRG fans have been going through the dark times because they're sticking to their guns. Honestly, NRG and BDS are in the same boat right now across regions.
I'd say NRG's in a worse boat, but I 100% agree with you. No, like, I think
NRG comparatively are doing better in North America than BDS are doing in Europe.
No,
so
like you're right. I'm just being pedantic, but yes, like but like I mean, both those teams. I mean, look, you could have a 1-for-1 trade all of a sudden between those two, but I also think there needs to be a conversation around the coach. I'm not saying like he's doing anything wrong, but your team is just straight up struggling. Nothing's been working for BDS. And look, BDS didn't pay attention to the format. That's their fault. They weren't ready to play on Friday after they played. That is also your fault. At the end of the day, no one's going to win your games except you. So like there is some personal accountability that needs to go to BDS's side, but also the coaching has not been working. Whatever's been going on, and Mew's proven that he's a great coach, but the coaching just hasn't worked because the team has looked the exact same for 3 months and it hasn't worked. So there needs to be a discussion about whether you need assistant coach to come in and help, whether you need a coaching change, whether it's just play style wise or fundamentally with a new person. There should be a conversation around the coaching because coaching matters. A good coach can turn a team around in an instant. And if it's a communication thing or like they're not on the same page, whose job is that? The coaches. It's the coach's job to get everybody on the same page. Like that's what coaches are for.
Players also have to be receptive to listen.
I think you need an assistant coach.
like you need the players also need to understand, what they're hearing is correct and believe in what they're being told and understand that, what the coach is saying is true. And I think for BDS, that I don't think that's a worry. Like, I think all of those players believe in Mew. I think they're listening to Mew. And for me, it seems like from what Monkey Moon is shedding a light into, it seems like there are a lot of personal issues that players are dealing with this year on that roster. And we've seen how much personal issues can affect gameplay. It's affected me in my matches. I've had stuff going on outside during important matches, and I played terrible. Like, it's just how it is. So, BDS definitely are, unfortunately, in the spotlight right now because they're such a polarizing team. They're polarizing figures in the community. They essentially led this French Revolution, in my opinion, that has bled down from them to the top down. They've started this playstyle change, and the way Europe's taken off, I would accredit a lot to their dominance. Similar to what Gen G is doing in NA. Like, I think NA next year is going to be a different animal compared to what it was this year, but that's a conversation for 6 months from now. I want to talk about Oxygen real quick because we didn't really talk about them last week. They've been sneakily putting up top 4s, and they're my bias team because I cast for them, if you don't know. So I have a front row seat every week, and another top 4 finish for them. But I will say Carmine is kind of their daddy. Every time they've run into Carmine, they kind of get slapped around. And I've talked to Jorias and Rise about how they thought that their biggest issue is always been Carmine, even when they had Oli on the team. Shout out Oli. I hope you get a roster. Maybe that BDS spot for Oli would be a really good pickup. Because he's waiting in the wings. He's very, very talented. People have forgotten about him. Anyways, Oxygen, back to them. Carmine is their daddy. Otherwise, it seems like they are, frankly, dominant. I don't see anyone else doing what Jorias does as consistently as he does mechanically. He is so impressive. They add Rise now in, and in their clutch moments that you think Rise would matter in, he's changed all the results. I think they're 4-0 in game 5s with Rise now, broken wrist included.
He's one of the most clutch players.
They don't lose the tough games. The problem is with Carmine, they don't get there. So, would you even consider them a top team if they can't beat the number 1? Because they're just going to you're going to run into that team eventually, right? So, what do you guys see out of this Oxygen squad? Because for me, if they align all the stars with their play style, they're very pass heavy. They're very splicey. Like, they like to pass. They like to be positionally heavy. They're not afraid of mechanics. They're not afraid to counterattack. They're not afraid to just send it. And it's been working for them because they're so mechanically consistent. All 3 players are extremely confident. So, what are you guys seeing? Do you back them as much as I do? Are you bleeding green like me, or what's going on? Where are your heads at?
The addition of Rise gives them a lot more, I think, stability than when they had with Oli. Oxygen had this incredible cannon of an offense, and occasionally, if mechanics faltered for even a little bit, you would see some defensive blunders. And now with Rise, the top end I think has been toned down a little bit. There are still those explosive moments from players, but there's a lot more trust happening on the back third of the pitch. And that's why Oxygen have just been top 4, and they just can't quite peak over Carmine. I think that might just be a head-to-head matchup, like a rivalry where one team, rock, paper, scissors, has the advantage over the other. But it really puts a lot more stock into them, for my opinion, for the major. I can trust Oxygen to get through matches that might be a bit weird, or maybe they're not playing the best on the day, or they're playing against a team that's peaking really well. Going into the last major with Oli, Oxygen had peaked and won the first regional, and then completely missed top 8 and had to scramble their way back into the major. And it was really, it put a lot of pressure on them that didn't need to be on them. And now I feel like because they're just focused a lot more on the consistency, it's a lot less pressure, and it's going to allow Jorias and Archie to really just play better on LAN. And Rise should not need, I think he's going to only be in a cast for the major. He doesn't have to wear, because I think he was in a sling. He was in a sling for this regional though, and he was still putting up numbers.
He played unreal. He was so good this weekend.
Oh yeah, that record is.
They all were. I mean, Oxygen this weekend, I was surprised when they lost to Carmine because on Friday they looked like the best team in the world. The problem is that they seem to run into the same issue that we ran into as a team when we would play teams that knew how to rotate really well and cut your passes, which is basically like anytime you played a top 8 team at the time or top 6 team at the time. I feel like Oxygen kind of run into somewhat of that issue where they play the real top-end talent players, like those top 4 teams, where they realize what Oxygen are trying to do consistently, and they're always there ready for it. Whereas when Oxygen play anyone outside that, they find those little gaps where they're not ready for that passing play and spring the offense that way. So I'm nervous for Oxygen because I think that they're onto something, but at the same time, it seems like they need to understand that it seems like it's ceilinging. It's like cutting them off a little bit at a certain level because they're reaching that plateau and they can't get past.
Yeah, I still think peak Carmine, peak Liquid, peak Gen G, and peak FaZe beat Oxygen every day. So
really?
I honestly, I think internationally, Oxygen, if all teams are at their best, Oxygen are not an international top 4 team. They're like 5th. But we'll see. They've had an entire split to figure it out.
So really the teams right now at the major cam, Carmine Core, they're worse than, right? You say?
I think
Liquid,
so.
They're worse than. Vitality.
This Vitality, I think Oxygen can beat on LAN.
Okay, so you think they're better than...
Zen's a different monster. We'll see about that.
Then G1 for sure. So Gen G, you don't think a peaking mechanical team could beat Gen G's positional style?
No, because Gen G normally beat FaZe, and FaZe have some of the best mechanics in the world. So Gen G are very prepared for that.
All right. Yeah, I think Oxygen at 5 is rough, but also I don't know where else you put them. Because visually they feel better to me than a 5. But I don't want to... So I would put them above Liquid, I think. Because I think even though Liquid have won the regional, Oxygen have maintained consistency for over 6 months now of this top 4 powerhouse. They have also won a regional, however, it was long since then. That was with Oli. I believe it was the first regional. They kind of pulled a phase where they won the first regional, and then they've kind of tapered off a bit.
Yeah.
But I will say that it's been surprising to me how consistent they are at the top 4. I mean, they seemingly always are in that conversation. Similarly, to a G2. And there's something about the Oxygen squad where I feel like, similarly to you, where if they get to that finals, I look at them at G2, it's do you guys have the power? Because every time you've gotten there, you just end up falling a little bit short.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I feel that about Oxygen. It's just because when you look at the roster, that shouldn't be in the equation. You have Rise, one of the best clutch players in the world. Jory is arguably the best mechanical player in the world. And then Archie, who I think on his time is a combination of kind of both of them, where he's great at passing, he's great. He kind of does everything. And in theory, if all those click and they find the team chemistry, I think that they could easily be the best in the world. But for some reason, maybe it's the experience, maybe it's the youthfulness of the roster. They've only started being a serious contender this year. So maybe it's a next year thing for them. But for me, Oxygen is totally in that conversation of potentially one of the best teams if they can align themselves.
I don't think the majority of people will say that Oxygen is a serious contender on LAN, even though I would say that. I think that Oxygen is better than what they've showed. And I think that
you think it's an org issue?
No.
Or a player issue?
I think it's just maybe, I don't think it's playstyle. I think it's I think I agree with you. Oxygen right now, when they're playing at their best, you can see what their ceiling is, but I need more dimensions from this team, whether it's a passing or whether it's a passing change or whether it's a fundamental change to their defense to counterattack situation, because mechanically,
look at those losses.
Mechanically, they're one of the best teams in the world. They're not the best, but they are one of the best. But there are teams that do what Oxygen does better, whether it's one thing or a couple things, but Oxygen has always won. They've always, even this is their best Friday they've just had in a while. They looked really, really good, and they've struggled in early games. But Oxygen, to me, is a team that, as of now, is better than what their record shows. They max out, it seems like, top 4 every time. And if it's a David versus Goliath where their Goliath is clearly Carmine Core, then cool. Like, it's like I would rather them be playing that consistently to force them to evolve and get better. And then if they clear that hurdle, they're good to go and they get to a grand final. But I don't blame people for thinking that Oxygen isn't top 4 ready internationally yet, but I do see this team being there. I think this team is capable of winning a chip in Europe, and I said it on broadcast on Friday. I was like, look, this is a squad we expect championships from, and they've really just kind of gotten to top 4. And I know that.
The players and the org want that as well. I know they're fiending for it.
I think this is a squad that this is like, I think they have the right roster for it, but this feels like the Oxygen 1.0. And if they can get to 2.0, whatever that looks like, if they can evolve their game beyond what they have now in all facets, I think they absolutely have every piece they need to win a title. But it's really just come down to results. I just need to see them win. Like I think they're capable of it. They just haven't done it.
Sleeky on screen, if you guys are watching on the multi-stream on Twitch, has the Oxygen's last 20 matches head-to-head up on screen, and they're 20-6. 14-6 in their last 20 series. Their losses, listen to these losses and what they all have in common. Lost 4-1 to Carmine Corp, lost 4-0 to Carmine Corp, lost 4-3 to Team Vitality, lost 3-2 to BDS, lost 4-3 to FaZe, lost 4-2 to G1. And to me, all those teams have in common is that they're all top 4 teams in the world. FaZe, Vitality, BDS at the time was not. That loss to BDS was in January, so I kind of wouldn't include that.
That was in Swiss.
Yeah, so I kind of wouldn't include that, but anyway, it still fits. BDS, Vitality, Carmine, and G1, all and FaZe, all major contenders and top teams in the world. Other than that, Oxygen's cleaning house. The problem is when they get there.
The BDS and Vitality losses are the ones where I look at it and I'm like, that's the problem, is that they're losing. Like, I remember I was on the match when they played BDS, and I picked Oxygen to win that because I was like, they're just the better team. And they came out and they were so flat-footed in the opening start of the series. Just like,
it's a play style issue.
It wasn't that they were missing passes because they were, but it was like the offense, the creativity in the offense wasn't there. When they got caught and they kind of got like exposed in the headlights, they just stayed the same the entire game and they weren't really changing things up. So look at the BDS as a clear example of like, this team just needs to prove that it can get through that game. And then the Vitality as well. Now, granted, Vitality looks amazing at times and like they've just gotten better. But I look at those matchups, I'm like, Oxygen, the only people you should be losing to really is Carmine and like maybe a quadrant here and there on a quadrant good day, but like maybe top 2 teams. But losing to BDS in that matchup and the way BDS look now, like that should never happen for Oxygen. That is a matchup they should be winning 10 times out of 10. And that's my problem with them, is that like, I know they're better than this, but they have yet to prove to me that they can get through those opening matches on Fridays that kill teams, because that kills your group if you lose that. And they need to do better.
It's really just a matter of time for Oxygen. Like, I think you guys bring up good points. They have all the pieces. And the only reason I'm not putting stock in them for this major is because they just need a little bit more time to cook. They need more time in the oven. And I think this roster is very capable of winning championships, winning regionals, winning majors, maybe winning world championships. We'll see. But I just haven't seen enough of them yet. But the consistency to always make it to these top 4s, and then once they get there, decide, okay, what's the one thing that's been working for us that we need to like go all in on, right? If it's, Jordan needs to go for flip resets nonstop because he's been hitting them today, versus not doing that. Like, Jordan needs to pass the ball all the time because he doesn't feel great mechanically today, right? Whatever it's going to be, them getting to top 4 lets them experiment against what to do against the best teams in the world. Yeah. And the more time they get doing that, eventually they're going to figure it out.
They need to commit to something. I think that's a great way to put it. It's like, because a lot of times it feels like they're trying to do everything they do right all the time, whether it's committing to like, Jory's just flip reset, or, we need to focus on passing when we're upfield, or we need to focus on defense. Like, guys, just pick something, and like, if it works that day, follow it until it stops working and then change. It just seems like there are days, especially when they start a regional, where they're trying to do everything. I'm like, just pick one lane and then move accordingly. And if they do that, they'll be fine. But yeah, I need to see them do it consistently before I give them the nod. But I think they're capable. They are a very good team.
They just can't run into a French team in the semis. And anytime they hit the French Revolution in the semifinals, it's over. Yeah, once they get the experience to understand. Yeah, I agree with you there. So yeah, Oxygen had a great a great Friday that caught my attention. Didn't turn into a great weekend for them. However, I mean, we're talking about a team that gets top 4 every single regional, or wins. So it's not like they're feeling bad about themselves, but yeah. they are in the conversation for, I think, some of the best players in the world, and they're flying a little bit under the radar. At least on this show, it's my own fault. I haven't mentioned Oxygen as much just because I talk about how biased I am towards them.
Yeah, I mean, this regional specifically is a bit of a boring top 8 for Oxygen, because they steamrolled the open qual team that made a top 8. Props to them. But the Oxygen Bluefax DOP game was not the most exciting thing in the world.
Yeah,
Oxygen just had no problem with that, and then they immediately had the reverse happen to them with Carmine.
Yeah, and it was the same for Carmine with BDS. They kind of stomped them as well. It felt like Europe this week other than that Liquid series was kind of like those teams were dominant.
The Quadrant Liquid series was so intense, and Quadrant needed to win that to just avoid all tiebreaker scenarios, and instead G1 just making everybody's nightmares come true with the Vitality win.
Yeah. 3 overtimes in that Quadrant series. Only getting one of them was Quadrant, so that is just, and it went to all 7 games, and then unfortunately in the game 7 it was a 5-0 win from Liquid. They had scored like right off of the rip, I think twice, like within the first minute they were up, and it just kind of ran away from Quadrant there. I think they knew they were down and they had to kind of try and scrape back into it, and it ended up falling away. But if you guys
didn't Quadrant score first? Didn't they score and then Liquid just piled it on?
No, it's 5-0.
Oh, it's 5-0.
Quadrant didn't score at all in game 7.
There's another game 5 or 7 where it was, I think
game 5 they won 5-0. Quadrant did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was like a mirror of that game, except the other way.
Right. Yeah. So look, sometimes you get game 7s like that for sure, but
yeah,
Quadrant's in the same spot too, where it's like they're not. I don't look at them as the same level of Oxygen. Like if Oxygen's 4th, I put Quadrant like 5th or 6th, but I'm like Quadrant's way better than their slow starts, and they just have to prove it, and they've just struggled to do so.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Yeah. I think that you're on the stuff there. I think the big question mark that I think we should end the show with is, what teams are you guys that aren't making the major? Do you have an eye on maybe making a roster move this split? Because we won't be talking about the teams that are not in the major again until the spring, which if you guys don't, spring, which starts in June. So, it's going to be quite a bit before we talk about these teams again specifically.
Yeah.
Of course, the big one is BDS, but I'm talking about teams like German Amigos who surprised me this whole split. I give a lot of credit to Tox, who I've known has been around the U scene a long time. Finally making it through to RLCS. The past split has just been playing amazing with his team. So, any rosters you guys think are going to make big moves in the off season?
I just don't think BDS are going to make a move. I think they're too stubborn to do anything until probably like Worlds. I think Quadrant are maybe the most likely to change something, but Tox is also a very, very potentially hot free agent if you can get him. Oh man, the tiebreakers were just so sad. I honestly wanted all 3 teams at the major. I wanted to see Quadrant there again. I wanted to see Mark on G1 finally get back to the major. I wanted to see German Amigos make it to the major after not having their org. So I think German Amigos are likely to have the biggest chip on their shoulder for not making it, and maybe a roster move happens because of that.
Yeah, like one of the players wanting to be on an org or be on a major contender and leaving them, or...
I think there's a lot of motivations for German Amigos players to change something, but that comes down to how closely they see each other as teammates, if they just want to stick it out or not.
Yeah, I think Cash
Moist
Cannon...
definitely aren't.
I think Cash Cannon on Quadrant is an interesting scenario. And I say that because of how badly he seems to want it. when he's come on our show, he's talked about how he is someone who's motivated by just winning, and he's not motivated by money or, things like that come into some other players' factors. He's just obsessed with wanting to be the best. And I think, when you have a player like that on a team that's close to being there, but not quite there, or perennially getting close and falling short, that type of mentality maybe creeps in there, and he's like, okay, if there's a spot open on these top rosters, maybe like a Moist, and I don't even think Moist can make a change because they already have, right?
Yeah, they grab Juicy.
And Vitality is making a change already. So there are things that are already happening that are preventing major roster moves, but I think a team like Quadrant is interesting because they're really, really good, but at the same time, I do feel like something is missing. And I don't like saying that because I really like this roster and I love that team. But, I just feel like to get over the top, they need something extra. And I don't know if that's, a little bit hard-nosed coaching, coming together as a team, because the skill and the talent is there for sure. That's not it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how many times are you guys going to come close and, maybe not let it consume your mind that you need a change?
I mean, it's getting late into the season anyway. It's where the top 8 teams, they all keep their roster because they have enough points, and they'll probably be at Worlds. Quadrant are likely to make it into Worlds. So, you have one bad major, okay, it's fine. Just run it back. And the bottom 8 teams that probably aren't going to make Worlds get a free reroll, and they start shuffling like crazy just to maybe get a major.
Right. And then you're wondering, are we even lower now? Those are all the things that you have to consider. I think with Vitality's roster move being known, that him and Oli, by him I mean whatever player Vitality decides to move to that sub position, plus Oli are like 2 huge free agents this winter that are totally free. Well, not free because you're signed to Vitality, but I mean they're not on rosters that need to make a move. They're technically free agents that can come in individually that have that high level skill,
right,
that have that high level talent. And then you also have that German Amigo squad. You can pick any of them if you're a team that is signed and interested. All of them are free agents as well. So I think those group of 5 are going to dramatically affect the winter off season. And I think the 2 teams that are the 3 teams that I would target as maybe making the moves are BDS, if you think they are, Amigos, like Cam said, and Quadrant. I don't think Moist can make a move, even though they might want to because they're frustrated. I think that roster just needs time. But otherwise, I think everyone else outside or inside the top 10 is probably remaining the same.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Europe Invitational, that's going to wrap it up for our show. I think we pretty much covered as much as we can. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we head into NA? Actually, Sleeky, could you pull up the graphic I sent you? Just as we're leaving, I want to throw the playoff scenarios for NA up for everyone watching or listening. Because it's the NA Invitational this weekend. We are finding out the NA Major coming in. I put that, Sleeky, in the general production chat in case you can't find it. So, guys, what do you guys think about NA this weekend? The only confirmed NA team for the Major right now, I believe, is Gen G.
It's not them, it's nobody. It should be them.
The NA team only is Gen G. So major teams right now from Europe are Carmine, Liquid, Oxygen, Vitality, G1. From Sam, you have Secret and Crew. And from APAC, you have Gaming Gladiators. Those are the 8 teams right now so far involved. So we need 4 more teams from NA. Who are you guys picking?
FaZe.
Yeah.
G2.
Yep.
Space Station.
Woo! Okay.
I think
That's
Complexity
a unique
won't make it. They're going to throw this lead they have.
I think they're going to throw it. Yep.
So for you realize, Sean, by saying Space Station, you're picking them to win the regional.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, I guess
I
so.
mean, listen, I think that Space Station have a very good chance. I don't think they're going to win the regional. I think that they have a very good chance to even if I don't believe it, I think they have a good chance to maybe do it. Like, who knows if they decide to turn up all of a sudden. But realistically, like, the top 4 in NA have been the top 4 for pretty much the past 3 weeks consistently, and I don't think that's going to change. FaZe is going to make it, no question. Like, if FaZe don't get top 4, 3rd or 4th, whatever they need, they don't get top 4, we will beat on them for a while because that'll be hilarious. But, like, FaZe will get there. G2 should, no question. Like, if G2 just wake up out of bed, they'll be fine. And Complexity, who has been inconsistently consistent. They have been very, very good at very random times, but they've still been fighters and proved that they deserve to be top 4. And I think they'll get there. I mean, like, at the end of the day, the top 4 you see in NA is probably the top 4 that's going, but I don't know, because NA is always really weird, and M80 could just piss off a lot of people this weekend and do another top 8 run and make things difficult. I wish Optic Gaming would win, but they won't. So, you know, just I have no idea. I think the NA roster changes are going to be much more interesting than the EU ones.
Yeah, I think the top 4 being the top 4 is just a great way to put North America. I mean, because I think Complexity will make the major. And that last spot comes down to, I think it's between M80 and Space Station for me. I think I'll actually go. I think M80 making the major would be hype. So I think that last spot should go to them.
Agreed. I wish we had more teams. I do. I wish we had.
I do too. The fact that version 1 Optic not in the conversation, NRG barely in the conversation, Furia barely in the conversation. I mean, that's sad.
I mean, hey, Furia and NRG could go and just straight up win.
Yeah.
And then they get a tiebreaker, and they've got to win that too.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
I think this Furia roster needs
to go crazy.
Furia would be the team that I would want to do that. I'm sorry, my NRG fangirl kind of takes a back seat there, because I'd love to see NRG at the LAN. I just don't see it happening this weekend.
Optic literally has to get second minimum to make it, to get a chance, because then everybody else has to lose. Like, Optic has to win. There's no shot
Optic even makes. I don't even think they make top 8.
I looked at I don't know. I looked at the spread, and it literally said Optic has to get top 2, and then, like, here's 30 things that need to happen for them to get qualified for the major. So I'm gonna believe. I'm gonna predict them this weekend. That's fine. I'll go on that limb. But, like, that's the thing. Like, it's you know, it's you're a victim of the circumstance. But
Knights, M80, and FaZe's group. They make it out of that?
Optic just need to get out of groups.
If Optic come out and let's say they play FaZe and they beat them, it's probably not gonna happen, but I'm gonna just say copium. Let's say they beat them, they could win that group, no question about it. They could win that group and have a very good shot at making a run, because I think that team is better than clearly what they've put up. But that's the likelihood of that happening is no.
So if Optic do their job and they come in second place in Group B behind FaZe, which I would think is their job, they play one of Complexity, version 1, or NRG in the first round.
They would want
energy. That's rough.
They would want energy.
Yeah,
they would want version 1.
Yeah, there's not Complexity.
Yeah, no, you'd want version 1. But, like, again, even if Optic gets the second, or even if Optic gets to a grand final, they need 15 other things to go their way with other teams losing for them to have a shot. So you're not even controlling your destiny here.
Yeah, that's what sucks.
The list of things that is required is, like, more than Optic just winning the regional. Like, it's insane.
They have to win with help and win tiebreakers. Same with Energy and Furia.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at basically Dignitas, M80, or Space Station being the teams that are most likely to cause any upsets apart from Complexity, FaZe, and G2. Because I think those 3 are locks. I think 1, FaZe, Cole, G2, good. Then it's that one spot. You have potentially 5 teams, 6 teams fighting for the same result.
Yeah. This is a big weekend for Dignitas.
Yeah, this is a huge weekend for Dignitas. Which Nick is the coach of, who formerly coached Moist, which made those huge impact runs in Europe. And he started making the first impact runs with Dig in NA. So that's an interesting storyline for you guys to keep an eye on. Coaching in Rocket League. If you're interested in coaching in the impacts, keep an eye on that Dignitas roster, because Nick has already proven that he can take a top 16 team and make it to a top 8, even a grand finals perennially winning team, which I don't think many coaches have on their resume.
Wasn't he coaching Dig when it was App, Jack, and Jorius? And
I believe he was.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, He's had very good rosters. He's had rosters that have not proven themselves, like this current Dig, but they're doing it. Like, they're doing it now. So there's that Dig. Keep an eye on Dig and M80. They might do something.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. And keep an eye out for us. We'll be there as well after the regional next Sunday, or the invitational, I should say, next Sunday. We'll be recapping afterwards. So if you're looking for us, tune in here around that time after the grand finals, and we'll be talking Rocket League. And until next time, we'll see you guys then. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Nothing is over until we decide it is.